What is the true cost of kindness? For Era Hayes, a waitress barely surviving on tips, it was a profound question she had never prepared herself to answer. She had simply seen a small, lonely girl sequestered in the gloom of her corner diner, a child who ate in silence and whose face seemed incapable of forming a smile. So Era had offered a simple, impulsive gift. A cookie, a quiet word, a small pocket of undivided attention. She could not have known that this single, small act of compassion was the match strike that would ignite a firestorm, pulling her violently out of her ordinary struggle and into an elevated world of unimaginable wealth, ruthless social maneuvering, dangerous manipulations, and a core secret that would threaten to destroy everything she thought she knew. She believed she was offering solace to a neglected child. She had absolutely no idea she was challenging one of the most insulated and powerful dynasties in the entire country. The smell of stale, acidic coffee and aggressively applied industrial bleach was the first thing that assaulted Hayes every morning when she unlocked the door. A smell she had come to recognize intimately as the precise aroma of survival. At 24, Era's existence was a repeating, exhausting loop. Double shifts at the worn-out Corner Cup diner, navigating the dangerous, ice-slicked cracks in the sidewalk on the long, dark walk back to her tiny studio apartment, and the constant, dull, corrosive ache of anxiety in her stomach over next month's rent, which always seemed to be coming due far too fast. The Corner Cup was an outright relic, a defiant, greasy spoon that stubbornly clung to its crumbling foundation, fighting a losing war against the encroaching wave of sleek, merciless gentrification that had already consumed all the blocks closer to downtown. Its regular clientele was a precise mix of cement dust-covered construction workers gulping down bitter black coffee at dawn and weary local residents. People like Era, who were just trying to hold on until the next paycheck. Era was excellent at her job. She was fast, relentlessly efficient, and had perfected a public-facing smile, a mask, that was highly functional but didn't dare to extend warmth or reach the guarded depth of her eyes. Her own traumatic past was a heavy thing she kept deliberately locked away. A childhood spent shuffling through a series of indifferent, impersonal foster homes had delivered one cold, immutable lesson. The only person you could ever truly rely on was yourself. Perhaps that unshakable self-reliance, that quiet watchfulness, was precisely why she noticed the girl. The girl came in with reliable precision every Tuesday and Thursday, exactly at 4:15 p.m. She was noticeably small for her estimated age, perhaps 6 or 7, dominated by enormous, somber blue eyes that seemed to absorb all the natural light and warmth in the room. She was always accompanied by a severely detached woman in a stark gray coat, a woman Era had mentally christened Miss Finch. They claimed the same booth every time, the vinyl-cracked one by the window that rattled violently whenever the city bus groaned past. Miss Finch would order a lukewarm black coffee and a plate of dry toast, which she never so much as glanced at. The girl, whose name Era later learned was Lily, would receive only a glass of water. Then, Miss Finch would ceremoniously pull out her phone and a pair of wireless earbuds, her face settling into a practiced mask of bored indifference, and she would simply disappear into her digital world. Lily, in sharp contrast, would pull out a worn leather-bound sketchbook and a small tin of colored pencils, and she would draw for the rest of the afternoon. She would draw with an absolute concentration that was almost painful to witness. She never spoke. She never fidgeted. She just drew, her small hand moving with precise, almost unnaturally deliberate strokes. Era watched them repeat this ritual for weeks. Her gut twisted with a familiar ache for the girl. She recognized the look instantly. A profound, crushing loneliness, an abandonment that no child, especially one so small, should ever have to bear. Era saw a painful, distorted mirror of her own silent childhood in those lonely afternoons. She had assumed, naturally, that they were operating on a tragically tight budget. Perhaps the woman was a stressed single working relative, and the diner was just a cheap, tolerated place to wait for a bus transfer or a dreaded custody exchange. One raw Tuesday afternoon, a brutal, unforgiving November storm lashed the city, turning the streets outside the window into dark, reflective, moving rivers. The diner was eerily quiet and empty, save for the two of them and a single trucker nursing a mug in the farthest corner. Lily was drawing, but her small shoulders were slumped in defeat. She looked smaller, infinitely more fragile than usual. Era was wiping down the counter when she saw it happen. A single, crystalline tear rolled down Lily's pale cheek and dropped silently onto the sketchbook page, instantly smudging the meticulous ink. Miss Finch didn't notice. She was deeply engrossed, her thumb a relentless, rhythmic blur on the glass screen. Era's carefully constructed professional detachment cracked, shattering like thin ice. She glanced over at her boss, Sal, who was blissfully preoccupied over the grill. Acting on a pure, reckless impulse, she grabbed one of the sugar cookies that Sal's wife baked every morning, a perfect, lopsided star. She slid it onto a small, pristine plate, added a bright sprig of mint she usually reserved for the deluxe burgers, and walked over. She placed the plate gently, silently on the table. "Hi," she whispered. Lily's head snapped up violently, her eyes wide with palpable alarm, as if she were anticipating a sharp reprimand or a scolding. Miss Finch finally looked up, annoyance instantly hardening her features. "She didn't order that. It's absolutely on the house," Era said, keeping her voice incredibly soft. Her attention and her gaze focused solely on Lily. "I saw you working so hard. I just thought you might like a star for your drawings." Lily looked from the bright cookie to Era, her small expression entirely unreadable. Then, very slowly, she reached out one finger and hesitantly touched the brittle, sugar-dusted edge of the star. Era smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that felt alien on her face. "My name's Era. What's yours?" The girl's voice was a tiny, unused, delicate thing. "Lily. That's a beautiful name," Era said. "You're a very good artist, Lily." A barely perceptible ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips. It was the first time Era had ever seen it. Miss Finch huffed loudly, irritated by the interruption to her digital piece. "We will be leaving very soon." "No problem," Era said, backing carefully away. "Enjoy the cookie, Lily." The bond started right there, solidified by sugar and shared silence. It was a clandestine conversation carried out over the next 2 months, operating in the blind spot of Miss Finch's digital distraction. Era would casually bring Lily a freshly baked cookie or a generous glass of cold milk she had accidentally poured. Lily, in silent, heartfelt return, would shyly show Era her latest drawings. They were nearly all of the same subject. A house, massive, sprawling, impossibly large, and possessing hundreds of windows. But in every single drawing, all the windows were unsettlingly dark, and there was always only one small, lonely figure, usually positioned in the vast garden, looking longingly at the imposing structure. Era, drawing on her own deep-seated background, completely misinterpreted the motif. She thought the girl was in foster care, just like her, and was drawing a fantastical dream home, a life she desperately wished she had. Era, in response, would draw silly, quick cartoons on the back of old receipts. A cat wearing a chef's hat, a dancing coffee mug, trying to lighten the mood. Lily would giggle, a small, breathy sound, and carefully tuck the drawings into her sketchbook like priceless treasures. Era was poor, perpetually tired, and her future was a blank, foggy, frightening question mark. But for one precious hour, twice a week, she felt like she was doing something that genuinely mattered. She was giving this lonely little girl the one thing she herself had never, ever been given. A moment of undivided, unconditional human attention. She had absolutely no idea that this simple, illicit human connection was not just a kindness, but a massive disruption. A dangerous variable being introduced into a carefully calculated, high-stakes equation worth billions. The week before Christmas, the established dynamic violently shifted. The air in the corner cup was thick with the manufactured smell of cinnamon and cheap pine emanating from the sad, tinsel-covered tree Sal had put up. Era had just finished a brutal lunch rush, her cheap apron stained with dried ketchup and her feet throbbing with agony. She was actively looking forward to 4:15 p.m. Having splurged on a small, $5 watercolor paint set to slip to Lily. The bell on the door chimed, but it wasn't Miss Finch and Lily. This time, Lily was flanked by two people who were so stunningly out of place in the greasy diner. They looked as if they had physically stepped out of the glossy pages of an international fashion magazine. The woman was unervingly tall, impeccably blonde, and encased in a cream-colored cashmere coat that almost certainly cost more than Era's last 6 months of rent combined. Her face was a perfect, sharp sculpture of high cheekbones and bored, icy disdain. The man beside her was, Era had to admit it despite herself, magnetic, radiating intense, tightly compressed energy. He wore a dark, perfectly tailored suit with no tie, and he was glued to his phone, his voice a low, authoritative rumble. I don't care about the projections, Mark. Liquidate the position. All of it, he said, without sparing a glance at where he was going. Sebastian, darling, the woman said, her voice like the chilling sound of ice chips cracking. Must you? We're here for this. She gestured vaguely at Lily, who was clutching her sketchbook protectively to her chest. One moment, Genevieve, the man, Sebastian said, holding up a dismissive hand. They slid into the booth. Lily looked utterly miserable, her face pale and drawn. Era felt a swift, protective instinct flare up, hot and fast. She walked over, her order pad already in hand. Welcome to the corner cup. Can I get you? The woman, Genevieve, cut her off instantly with a look that appraised, summarily dismissed, and utterly discarded Era in a single surgical second. Just coffee, black, and for her just water. She waved a dismissive, elegant hand at Lily. And for you, sir? Era asked, turning to the man. He was still on his phone, but he snapped it shut. Nothing. I'm not staying. He looked briefly at Lily, but his eyes were distant, still calculating profit and loss, not seeing his daughter. Lily, Miss Finch is ill. Genevieve has graciously agreed to watch you for the afternoon. Be good. Yes, father. Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, small enough to be lost in the sound of the grill. Era's blood ran instantly cold. Asterisk father. Asterisk this man. He seemed less like a parent and more like a CEO addressing a low-level, easily replaced employee. Sebastian gave a curt, almost perfunctory nod, and was instantly out the door. A massive black car with heavily tinted windows instantly pulled up to the curb, gliding silently, ready to receive him. Genevieve sighed loudly, pulling out her own phone. Children are such a process. Era brought the coffee. Lily looked up at her, her eyes wide, silent, and desperately pleading. Era slipped her a folded napkin drawing of a reindeer with a glowing red nose. Genevieve saw the quick exchange, and her eyes narrowed into hostile slits. Is there a problem? Era asked politely. Just do your job, Genevieve snapped, her voice carrying an edge of cold menace. And stop distracting the child. Era retreated, fuming internally. She watched as Genevieve proceeded to completely ignore Lily for the next 40 minutes, texting furiously, her expression bored stiff. Lily, sensing the hostile, dangerous atmosphere, didn't even dare to open her sketchbook. She just held it like a shield. Finally, Genevieve stood up, dropping a few crumpled bills onto the table without counting them. Come, Lily, we're going. We have your fitting for the gala. Lily scrambled out of the booth, her movements jerky and anxious. As she did, her elbow knocked the sketchbook. It slid silently off the cracked vinyl seat and landed unseen in the narrow gap between the booth and the wall, swallowed by the darkness. Hurry up, Genevieve called impatiently from the door. My book, Lily cried out, turning back desperately. There's no time. I'll buy you a new one, Genevieve said, pulling the child roughly by the arm out into the freezing street. Lily's small protest was instantly lost as the heavy door swung shut behind them. Era watched them go, her heart pounding with a helpless, frustrated anger. How could anyone be so casually, relentlessly cruel? She rushed over to the booth and retrieved the book. It felt sacred in her hands, a physical, tangible manifestation of the girl's trapped, resilient spirit. She knew, with a certainty that overcame all logic, that she had to return it. It wasn't just a book. It was Lily's most precious possession. She finished her shift at 7 o'clock, the the worn sketchbook tucked safely inside her worn messenger bag. She opened it, hoping to find a mundane address, a street name, perhaps a phone number. There was no address, but on the inside cover, there was a small, unmistakable gold embossed sticker. From the library of the Pembroke Academy. Era knew of Pembroke. Everyone in the city did. It was the exclusive preparatory school for the children of the city's rarefied elite. A fortress built of old money and staggering new tech billions, nestled deep within the hyper-exclusive, gated community of Sovereign Hill. Her diner was in the working-class part of town known simply as the Heights. Pembroke was in the other Heights, a different economic dimension entirely. She checked the bus schedule. The journey would require 2 nerve-wracking transfers and a long, frigid walk in the biting cold. Her feet ached constantly. Her rent was due in 3 days. She should have been calling Sal to pick up an extra shift, not chasing after a rich girl's expensive toy. But then she remembered Lily's face, the precise tear on the page, the desperate, mute plea in her eyes as Genevieve had dragged her away. "Damn it," Era muttered, pulling her thin, threadbare coat tighter around her. She sprinted for the bus. The journey to Sovereign Hill was less like a commute and more like passing through a sudden, terrifying portal to another dimension. Era's bus rumbled from the gritty, graffiti-tagged streets of her neighborhood, with its check-cashing stores and boarded-up storefronts, eventually transitioning onto wide, manicured, tree-lined boulevards. The houses grew steadily larger, set farther and farther back from the road, until they disappeared entirely behind massive 20-foot-high stone walls and intricate, intimidating wrought iron gates. The bus dropped her at the massive main entrance to the Sovereign Hill community. A uniformed guard stepped out of a heated booth, his expression bored and supremely indifferent until he actually saw Era. Her worn-out sneakers, her thin jacket, and the small corner cup logo visible on her apron, which she'd forgotten to take off, marked her instantly and irrevocably as an outsider. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone implying he knew perfectly well that she required no assistance and should be leaving immediately. I'm looking for a student from Pembroke Academy," Era stammered, holding up the worn sketchbook. "Her name is Lily Thorne. She left this at my diner. I just wanted to return it to her." The guard's professional expression hardened instantly. "Thorne? You're here for the Thorne estate?" He looked at her with the deep disbelief reserved for someone who had just claimed to be the Queen of England. "We do not allow unannounced deliveries. You can leave it with me." "No," Era said, clutching the book tighter to her chest. "I want to give it to her personally." She was very upset. The guard sighed dramatically, clearly infuriated by this breach of protocol. He spoke into a radio clipped to his shoulder. "Got a 10 to 96 at the main gate. A waitress claims to have property for the Thorne residence. Stand by." A moment later, a sleek black golf cart, more luxurious than Era's first car, pulled up silently. A different guard, this one visibly armed, stepped out. "I'll escort you, but you'll wait at the service entrance." Era was driven through a neighborhood so quiet and intensely private it was positively eerie. The houses were not merely houses. They were impregnable compounds. They finally stopped at a secondary gate that was even more imposing than the main community entrance. A solid, unyielding wall of black steel and dark stone. Era was directed to a small, unsigned utility door next to the massive, multi-car garage. She waited in the biting cold for 10 agonizing minutes before the door was pulled open violently by Miss Finch. The nanny's face, when she saw Era standing there, was a terrifying mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "You," Miss Finch hissed, her voice low and venomous, yet vibrating with terror. "How dare you come here?" "I just wanted to return Lily's book," Era said, holding it out immediately. She was so upset when she lost it. "You have no idea what you've done," Miss Finch interrupted, snatching the book away and clutching it protectively. "You are a waitress. You serve coffee and clean tables. You do not, ever, get involved in the lives of your customers. Do you know who Mr. Thorne is? He is Lily's father. He is Sebastian Thorne, the founder and CEO of Astronomics. He practically owns the global market. He is engaged to Genevieve Harding of the Harding banking family. These are not people you get involved with. You are a bug, and you just flew directly into a spider's web. Era recoiled as if struck. I just wanted to be nice. Your kindness is a dangerous complication. Miss Harding was highly displeased with Lily's attachment to you. Your presence here at this house is 1,000 times worse. You need to leave now, and you will never speak to Lily again. Do you understand? Era. A small, high voice cut through the chilling tension. Lily, dressed in silk pajamas, was standing at the top of a grand, curved staircase, visible through the glass panels of the main hall door. She had seen Era through the window. Before Miss Finch could react or stop her, Lily bolted down the stairs, running past the stunned nanny, and threw herself at Era, wrapping her arms tightly around the waitress's legs. You found it. You brought it back. Lily cried, burying her face fiercely in the fabric of Era's thin coat. Era's heart broke instantly. She knelt down, ignoring the frozen concrete and the horrified nanny, and hugged the child back hard. Of course I did, sweetie. I knew you'd miss it. Who is this? What in God's name is going on at my service door? The voice was Genevieve Harding's. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shimmering silk dressing gown, her face contorted in a sneer of pure disbelief and cold disgust. This person forced her way onto the property, Miss Finch said immediately, her voice shaking violently. She was clearly terrified of Genevieve's wrath. That's not true, Era said, standing up, though she kept a protective hand placed firmly on Lily's small shoulder. I was just returning. You were trespassing, Genevieve said, her voice dropping to a deadly, quiet hiss. You, a common diner waitress, think you can just show up here? What did you want? A reward? A job? Are you trying to extort us? What? No, I just wanted to give Lily her book. She's my friend, Lily shouted, a surprising, fierce show of defiance. Genevieve laughed. A cold, sharp, unpleasant sound. A friend? Darling, she serves people like us. She is not, and never will be, your friend. She's a nobody from a slum, and she is probably covered in grease. Era flinched physically as if she had been struck. The casual, absolute cruelty was breathtaking. I think you should leave now, Genevieve said, advancing dangerously on her. I just tried to be nice to her, Era pleaded, her voice trembling not just with cold, but with surging anger. Can't you see she's just a kid and she's desperately lonely? That, Genevieve said, her eyes narrowing to hostile slits, is the most ridiculous and insulting thing I have ever heard. She has everything. Tutors, clothes, a house you couldn't even dream of. She doesn't need friends. She needs discipline and appropriate boundaries. The low, resonant thrum of a high-performance engine cut through the cold night air. Headlights swept the drive. A massive black Maybach sedan pulled up silently, and Sebastian Thorne stepped out, his phone, as always, pressed tightly to his ear. He ended his call abruptly as he took in the strange tableau at his service entrance. His daughter clinging tightly to a disheveled, unknown stranger. His fiancée radiating white-hot fury, and his nanny looking utterly terrified. What in God's name, he said, is going on here? Sebastian Thorne instantly processed the scene with the same rapid, cold, and flawless analysis he routinely used for a highly volatile stock market position. Asset 1, his daughter Lily. Status: distressed, currently clinging to an unknown variable. Asset 2, his fiancée Genevieve. Status: furious, a potential liability in this context. Asset 3, the nanny Miss Finch. Status: frightened, unreliable data. Variable: the unknown woman. Status: poor, judging by the uniform, defiant, and the apparent source of the entire disruption. Sebastian. Thank God, Genevieve said instantly recalibrating her voice, shifting flawlessly from sharp ice to smooth, concerned velvet. This woman, she's been harassing Lily for weeks at that diner. I warned her to stay away, and now she's shown up at our home. She's clearly unstable. She's trespassing. That is a lie, Era exclaimed, her voice shaking slightly but strong enough to carry. Mr. Thorne, my name is Era Hayes. I work at the corner cup. Lily left her sketchbook there. I was just returning it. Sebastian's cold, hard gaze fell upon Era. It was not a human gaze, it was a detached, financial assessment. He saw her worn-out, cheap shoes, the faint ketchup stain on her apron, the wind-chapped redness of her cheeks. He saw in his mind not a person, but 1,000 potential lawsuits, 1,000 desperate people trying to claw a tiny piece of his immense wealth. "You're the waitress," he stated flatly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Era said. "I'm Lily's friend." "You're a stranger," Sebastian corrected her, his voice devoid of inflection. "One who has been given access to my child in a public space, and who has now used that access to locate my private residence." "I just looked up the school," Era protested, feeling suddenly like she was drowning in the sheer weight of his contempt. "I just wanted to do something nice." "She's my friend, Daddy," Lily cried out, her grip tightening painfully on Era's hand. "She's the only one who talks to me." That sentence should have shattered him. But to Sebastian, it was simply more noise, more emotional data that his mind was not equipped to process. His wife, Lily's mother, had died in this house. Since that devastating loss, his entire life had been a fortress-building exercise. Work was his meticulously crafted armor. His schedule was his impenetrable shield. Emotions were, by definition, a vulnerability he could not afford. Lily, his daughter, was a painful, constant reminder of that vulnerability, a part of his life he had dutifully outsourced to professionals like Miss Finch, and soon to Genevieve, who he had believed was practical and emotionally stable. "Lily, go inside now," he commanded. "No, Sebastian. Darling, don't be harsh," Genevieve cooed, stepping forward and attempting to gently peel Lily's small hands off Era. "Let's not make a scene. This poor girl is just confused. She doesn't understand social boundaries." She turned back to Era, her smile a predatory baring of teeth, triumph glittering in her eyes. "Thank you for returning the book. Your concern is noted, but it is entirely unwelcome." Sebastian reached into his perfectly tailored jacket and pulled out his wallet. The gesture was automatic, perfected by years of practice. A problem had presented itself, and he was applying the immediate, definitive solution. He pulled out 3 crisp $100 bills. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for your time. This should cover your trouble and your transportation expenses." He held the money out to her. Era stared at the cash. It was more than she made in a week. It was also the single most insulting, reductive thing that had ever happened to her. She looked at the money, then up at his cold, utterly impassive face. She looked at Genevieve's triumphant, vicious smirk, and finally, she looked at Lily, whose small face was crumbling into silent despair, seeing her only friend being dismissed like a low-rent delivery driver. Era pushed his hand away. The money fluttered down gently to the cold, wet pavement. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice low and fiercely quiet, yet carrying the weight of pure, unyielding conviction. Voice low and shaking with a righteous fury she hadn't known she possessed, Era stared him down. "I came here because I care about your daughter, which is clearly more than anyone else in this mausoleum does." She turned her gaze on Sebastian, and for the first time, she wasn't looking at the image of a titan, the celebrated billionaire on magazine covers. She was looking at a failed father, a man whose wealth had utterly blinded him to the basics of human connection. "You're her dad. You're glued to your phone while your fiancé openly insults her, and your nanny is too terrified of you to intervene. And this little girl, this amazing, brilliant, sweet little girl, is silently charting her isolation by drawing pictures of this giant, empty, gilded cage of a house where she is completely and utterly alone. You think because you've given her this?" Era gestured toward the sprawling, obsidian shadow of the mansion, its windows dark and lifeless, "that you've done your job. You're wrong. She's lonely and I feel sorry for her." She knelt beside Lily's rigid form, gave her a final, fierce hug, and whispered, "Be brave, Lily Pad. You have so much courage inside you." Then she stood, turned her back on the richest man she'd ever met, and walked away. She didn't wait for a car. She didn't want his money or his charity. She walked the entire 3-mile length of the Sovereign Hill driveway, down the dark, tree-lined roads, the chill of the night seeping through her diner uniform. She never once looked back. Behind her, the massive wrought-iron gates of the Thorne estate closed with a heavy, metallic thud that sounded like a final door slamming on her life. Sebastian Thorne stood frozen on his immaculate gravel driveway, the 3 wet $100 bills still lying forgotten at his feet. Genevieve, having rushed out, was sputtering beside him, her voice high and tight with outrage. The nerve, the audacity of that common girl. But Sebastian wasn't listening. He was watching Era's retreating figure disappear into the blackness. A single word she'd flung at him had lodged itself in his brain like a piece of shrapnel. Lonely. It was the same desolate word his wife, Clara, had used to describe him, quiet and final, right before she had died 5 years prior. The long walk back to her cramped corner of the city was a painful blur fueled only by cold air and residual adrenaline. By the time Alara shoved her key into the apartment lock, the white-hot fury had cooled, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and a creeping, paralyzing sense of dread. She hadn't just insulted a rich guy. She had insulted Sebastian Thorne, one of the most powerful and ruthless figures in the city, and she had done it in front of his calculating, cruel fiancé. She woke the next morning feeling utterly exposed, as though she had a large, pulsing target painted on her back. She put on her starched, familiar uniform, her hands shaking slightly as she tied the apron strings. "It'll be fine," she told her tired reflection in the steamed-up bathroom mirror. "What can they possibly do? It's a diner. They are billionaires who rule the financial world. They won't even waste another thought on me." But she had fundamentally misunderstood the kind of person Genevieve Harding was. For Genevieve, Alara wasn't merely a forgotten annoyance. She was a dangerously loose end. She was a witness to Genevieve's casual cruelty and, worse, a person who had seen Sebastian's perfectly curated life exposed as a grotesque sham. She had seen the truth, and she had to be silenced. She had to be systematically erased. Era walked into the corner cup and immediately knew the atmosphere was wrong. Sal, her boss, a man who usually greeted her with a gruff, "You're late," even when she was precisely on time, was standing by the register, his face pale and drawn. "Sal, are you okay? The coffee is not even on yet." "Alara, come in the back." He led her through the swinging door to his tiny, perpetually cluttered office, a space usually reserved for filing and complaints. A tall, impeccably dressed man in a charcoal suit, representing the city health department, was sitting in Sal's only chair, clinically rifling through ancient invoices. "What in the world is going on?" Era asked, her stomach tightening into a fearful knot. We got an anonymous tip," Sal said, his eyes avoiding hers, fixed instead on the floor. "A very detailed one. Claimed one of our waitresses was unhygienic. That she was fraternizing with customers in a way that was unprofessional, soliciting favors. That," Sal took a shaky breath, "that they said you were accepting payments from patrons off the books." "What? That's insane, Sal. You know me. I would never." "I do, kid. I know you," Sal said, his voice ragged with helplessness. "But this guy, he's not here for a warning or a simple fine. He's talking about shutting us down entirely. Fines that would bankrupt me." They knew, Era. They knew about the faulty wiring in the walk-in fridge. They knew about everything we've tried to hide for years. "It was her," Era whispered, the blood draining from her face. "Genevieve Harding." "I don't know who it was," Sal said, looking utterly defeated, his hands hanging limp at his sides. "All I know is they said the problem was you, and that if the problem was removed immediately, the inspection would be, quote, favorable. You're firing me." It wasn't a question. It was the stark, undeniable truth. "Era, I'm so sorry. I've got 3 kids to feed. This diner is all I have left in the world. They have me by the throat. I have to let you go." He handed her a slim envelope containing her last week's pay, all in cash. I can't even give you a reference." They made that excruciatingly clear. Era walked out of the diner and into the cold morning air in a daze. The world felt like it was suddenly tilting on its axis. Fired. Blacklisted. No reference. systematically annihilated. The next 2 weeks were a freefall into utter desperation. She applied at every diner, every coffee shop, every late-night bar in a 30-block radius. The response was disturbingly consistent. A polite, practiced, "We'll call you," followed by crushing silence. Or worse, a manager would look at her application, glance at her name, and suddenly, his face would cool, the eagerness vanishing as he'd say, "Oh, you. I'm sorry, Miss Hayes, the position was just filled this morning." Genevieve hadn't just gotten her fired. She had efficiently poisoned the entire well. A few quiet, powerful calls from a Harding family lawyer to the local restaurant association. A few whispered, carefully calculated rumors about Era Hayes' supposed history of theft and emotional instability. And just like that, Era Hayes was professionally radioactive. Her meager savings, which she had carefully guarded for months, evaporated in days. First went the internet, the only connection she had left to the job market. Then, the power went out, leaving her apartment cold and dark. Finally, the stark white eviction notice was taped to her door, an unmistakable X marking the end of her life in the city. She was packing her few, paltry belongings into a single cardboard box, tears of burning rage and utter helplessness streaming down her face. She was going to be homeless. All because she had committed the singular crime of giving a lonely child a cookie and speaking the truth. The world wasn't just unfair. It was structurally cruel. The rich, powerful people like Sebastian and Genevieve lived in a different, protected reality. They could snap their fingers and utterly destroy a person's life simply for being an inconvenience. She picked up her old, cracked alarm clock, about to toss it into the box, when she saw something tucked behind it on her nightstand. It was one of Lily's drawings, not one of Era's signature napkin cartoons, but one of Lily's own creations. Lily must have quietly tucked it into Era's apron pocket that last day at the diner before Genevieve had arrived. It was a drawing rendered in thick crayon of 2 figures. One was tall with wavy brown hair, clearly Era. The other was small, defined by 2 messy pigtails. They were holding hands in the center of the page. Above their heads, Lily had drawn a bright, fiercely yellow sun, and underneath, in the shaky, careful letters of a child, she had written, "My only friend." Alara sank onto her bare mattress, clutching the fragile piece of paper to her chest. The paralyzing self-pity vanished entirely, replaced by a cold, hard, terrifying resolve. Genevieve had tried to erase her. She had tried to break her spirit. She had successfully taken her job, her apartment, and her reputation. But she could not take this. This wasn't about Alara's poverty versus their staggering wealth anymore. This was about a child. A vulnerable, brilliant child trapped in a golden cage whose one sincere lifeline to the outside world had just been systematically, ruthlessly severed by the woman who was supposed to become her new mother. "She won't get away with this," Alara whispered to the empty, cold room, her voice vibrating with a promise. "I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I am not going to let that woman destroy that little girl." Era's resolve was one thing. Her brutal reality was another. She ended up at a women's shelter, sharing a cramped, airless room with 3 other women, all of whom had their own desperate stories of hitting rock bottom. She found a cash-in-hand job cleaning corporate offices downtown late at night. It was grueling, isolating, and anonymous work, but it was money. It was a start. 3 nights later, she was scrubbing the marble floor of a high-rise law firm when her cheap cell phone, clinging desperately to its last 10% of battery life, buzzed in her pocket. It was an unknown number. She usually ignored them, assuming they were creditors or bill collectors, but a desperate premonition made her answer. "Hello, Ms. Hayes. Alara Hayes." The voice on the other end was frantic, professional, and chillingly familiar. "This is she." "Who is this?" It's Miss Finch from the Thorne residence." Era's heart stopped dead in her chest. She stood up so fast she dropped the mop, which clattered loudly on the floor. "What is wrong?" "It's Lily," Miss Finch said, her voice cracking with a barely contained sob. "You have to come, please. She's at the St. James Mercy Hospital private wing." I'm so sorry, Miss Hayes. I should have spoken up sooner. I'm so sorry. What happened to her?" Era demanded, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone, the cleaning rags forgotten. It was Miss Harding. After you left, she's just been awful. She told Mr. Thorne that Lily was acting out and needed a firmer hand. This afternoon, Mr. Thorne was away at a board meeting. Miss Harding found that drawing, the one Lily made of you. Era's blood ran cold in her veins. My only friend. She tore it up. Miss Finch choked out, her voice ragged with guilt. She tore it up right in front of Lily and told her that you were a dirty, poor thief and that if Lily ever mentioned your name again, she would be sent away immediately to a punitive boarding school in Switzerland. Lily, she just collapsed. She wouldn't wake up. It was a psychological, non-epileptic seizure, the doctors said. An acute anxiety attack. She's awake now, but she won't speak. Ms. Hayes, she won't speak to anyone. Not her father. Not the doctors. She just keeps holding the pieces of the drawing. And she wrote your name on a piece of paper. I'm on my way, Alara said, ripping off her industrial cleaning gloves and running for the elevator. She took a cab, her first in years, and used the last of her cash savings, telling the driver tersely to keep the change. The St. James Mercy private wing was less a hospital unit and more a five-star hotel extension. All hushed tones, crystal chandeliers, and polished marble floors. Alara, in her stained, anonymous cleaning clothes and carrying the scent of floor wax and desperation, was a stark, jarring contrast to the wealthy quiet. Miss Finch met her by the elevators, her face ravaged by guilt and fear. This is entirely my fault. I am a coward. I was so scared of losing my job, of his anger. But I can't watch this happen to her. Where is she? Era asked, her voice low and dangerous, ignoring the nanny's lament. Miss Finch pointed down the hall, her hand trembling. Room 712. He's in there. Era pushed open the heavy wooden door. The room was immense, a luxurious suite that included a sitting area, a small kitchenette, and a sweeping panoramic view of the sparkling city lights. In the center, in a high-tech hospital bed surrounded by silent, gently beeping monitors, Lily looked impossibly small and fragile. Sebastian Thorne was standing by the window, his back to the room. He was not on the phone. He was just standing there, utterly still. He looked smaller, diminished, his $1,000 power suit rumpled and askew. He looked exactly like a man who had lost everything that mattered. He heard the door and turned, his eyes hollowed out by fear and sleeplessness. When he saw Era, his face became a complex, shifting mask of shock, deep shame, and a strange, desperate, overwhelming hope. He breathed, the sound barely audible. Miss Finch called me, Alara said, her voice completely devoid of fear. She had nothing left to lose, and that made her unassailable. She walked past him, ignoring him completely as if he were furniture, and went straight to the bed. She sat gently on the edge and took Lily's small, cold hand. The girl's eyes were closed, her face pale and still. Hey, Lily Pad, Era whispered, her voice thick with emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in weeks. It's me. It's Era. Lily's eyelids fluttered slightly but remained shut. I heard you had a bad day, Era continued, gently smoothing the hair back from Lily's feverish forehead. Me too. I lost my job and my apartment. I was so angry and scared that I thought I couldn't breathe. But then I remembered something. I remembered my friend who draws the best stars and the bravest-looking cats in the whole wide world. And I remembered that as long as I had a friend, I wasn't really alone. She gently took the crumpled, torn pieces of the drawing from Lily's other hand, which had been clutching them so tightly. This is beautiful, Lily, but she can't tear up the real thing. She can't tear up us. Our friendship is right here. Era gently tapped her own heart, and then right here, she tapped Lily's chest above her hospital gown. It's safe. It's untouchable. A small, choked sound came from the bed. Lily's eyes snapped open, and they were swimming with immediate, streaming tears. Alara, she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. I'm right here, sweetie. I promise I'm not going anywhere. They're gonna send me away, Lily cried, tears spilling onto the pillow. No, Era said, her voice suddenly fierce and absolute. No, they are absolutely not. Sebastian Thorne watched this impossible exchange. He watched this broke, homeless waitress. This woman his fiancé had tried so hard to utterly destroy. Do what a team of the world's most expensive pediatric specialists had failed to accomplish for the last 6 terrifying hours. She had brought his daughter back to life. He saw with horrifying, sudden clarity the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. He saw his imposing house not as the fortress he had intended, but exactly as Alara had described it, a prison. He saw his calculating fiancé not as a partner, but as a glittering, manipulative parasite. And he saw his own reflection in the darkened window glass. The richest man alive, a title he'd seen plastered across glossy magazines, and he realized with agonizing certainty that he was the poorest, most spiritually bankrupt man in this entire room. The door to the hospital room swept open with an impatient sound. Sebastian, I just spoke to Dr. Ulrich. Genevieve Harding stopped dead in the doorway. Her eyes, filled with cold, self-assured composure, locked onto Era, who was sitting protectively holding Lily's hand. The color drained from Genevieve's face completely, then returned in a rush of furious crimson blotches that marred her flawless makeup. What is she doing here? She spat, her voice laced with venom. Sebastian, have her arrested immediately. This is the stalker I told you about, the one who's been harassing us. She's probably what caused this entire neurotic episode. Sebastian Thorne looked at his fiancée. He truly saw her, without the blinding filter of ambition and convenience, for the very first time. He saw the perfect, calculated beauty, the cold, utterly ambitious eyes, and the vast, echoing void where a human heart should have been. Did you tear up Lily's drawing? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet, so flat it was unnerving. Genevieve faltered, trying to gather her scattered composure. What? Don't be absurd, Sebastian. I was tidying her room. It was just trash. Did you tell her she was going to be sent to Switzerland? She's out of control, Sebastian. She needs structure. I was acting as a mother. No, Sebastian said. You were acting as a monster. The door of the hospital room clicked shut, sealed closed by some unseen hand, trapping the 3 of them in a silence that was infinitely louder than Genevieve's ensuing. High-pitched screams of outrage would have been. The sterile, rhythmic beep of Lily's heart monitor became the only sound, a fragile metronome counting the seconds of a new, terrifying reality. Sebastian Thorne, the man who commanded global markets and brought foreign governments to heel with a single, sharp phone call, visibly deflated. The polished armor of his authority, his immense wealth, and his long-suppressed anger dissolved, leaving behind a man who looked utterly hollowed out. He staggered backward as if struck by a physical blow and sank heavily into the sterile vinyl visitor's chair. He put his head in his hands, his shoulders, clad in a $20,000 bespoke suit, shaking uncontrollably. For the first time since their first meeting, Era saw him not as a titan of industry, but as a terrified, utterly broken man. He was, she realized with a profound sense of aching pity, just as much a victim of his own isolated life and wealth as Lily was. Era did not look at him. Her entire focus remained fixed on the small, trembling girl in the bed. She gently took a cup of water from the bedside table, holding the straw to Lily's parched lips. Just a small sip, Lily pad. That's it. You're safe now. I'm right here. You are completely, totally safe. Lily's eyes, still wide with the shock of the confrontation, finally focused solely on Era. The stark terror began slowly to recede, replaced by a consuming, bone-deep weariness. She leaned her head into Era's comforting hand, a silent, desperate plea for lasting comfort. She's not coming back, Lily whispered, her voice a dry rasp. No, sweetie, Alara said, her voice a low, fierce promise that resonated through the quiet room. She is never, ever going to hurt you again. Across the room, Sebastian finally looked up. His eyes were intensely red. He hadn't wept, Era thought, probably in decades. He was a man who processed, who calculated, who acted. He did not permit himself to feel. And now, A tidal wave of grief and feeling he had suppressed for 5 agonizing years since his wife's death was crashing over him, and he was drowning in it. "She's right," he said, his voice a rough, unfamiliar croak. He cleared his throat forcefully, trying desperately to regain some semblance of the control that had defined his existence. "She's never coming back." He stood up, pulling at his suit jacket, an automaton trying mechanically to reset itself. And then he did the only thing he knew how to do when faced with a crisis. He reached for his wallet. It was an instinct as deeply ingrained as breathing itself. Problem had been identified. The solution was, invariably, payment. "Ms. Hayes." "Alara." He walked toward her, pulling out his leather checkbook and a heavy gold pen. What I allowed to happen to you? Your job? Your apartment? It's reprehensible. I can't begin to apologize." He fumbled slightly with the pen, his hand shaking. "Please, let me fix this. Tell me a number. Any number you can think of. I'll buy you a house. I'll set up a permanent fund for you. Whatever you want. I will make this right, Alara." He started to write the figure, his hand unsteady. Alara watched him. There was no rage left in her now, only a profound, aching pity for his inability to comprehend anything outside the language of commerce. She gently put her hand over his, stopping the pen before the ink touched the paper. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice soft but unyielding, "you're still doing it." He looked at her, his face confused, shattered. "Doing what?" "This." She tapped the checkbook lightly with her finger. "You're trying to write a check to make a devastating problem go away. You're trying to pay for your absolution. I am not a problem to be solved, Mr. Thorne. I am a person. And your daughter," she said, her gaze hardening with resolve, "is not a line item you can delegate or outsource. This is not a transaction." He flinched violently, pulling his hand back as if he had been physically burned. "Then what?" he pleaded, the last pretense of the powerful billionaire utterly gone, leaving only naked vulnerability. "What do you want? What can I possibly do?" I don't know how. I don't know how to do this." He gestured helplessly at his daughter, at the sterile, opulent room, at the wreckage of his entire life. "After my wife died, Lily's mother, I thought that if I built this fortress, if I gave Lily everything imaginable, that she would be safe. I thought work was the only thing I could possibly control, the only thing that made sense anymore. And I forgot how to be a father." Era finished for him, her voice low. He nodded, the admission a crushing, physical weight that seemed to finally buckle him. "Yes." Alara stood up. She had a choice to make, the biggest choice of her life. She could, right now, ask him for $1 million. He would hand it to her without blinking, perhaps even with relief. She could walk out that door, buy a new apartment, enroll in college and start a completely new, secure life. She could be free. She owed this man absolutely nothing. She looked at Sebastian, the richest man alive, now a pathetic, empty shell. Then she looked down at Lily, who was watching her with terrified, hopeful eyes. The eyes of a child who had seen every person she'd ever cared about eventually walk away. Era saw in that agonizing gaze her own reflection. She saw herself at 7, at 10, at 15, in a dozen different foster homes, watching social workers and foster parents walk out the door forever. She had spent her entire childhood wishing just one person, anyone, would simply stay. She took a deep, fortifying breath. She wasn't walking away. "Okay," she said, the word simple but carrying the weight of a monumental commitment. "I'll help you." Sebastian's head snapped up instantly. "You will? You'll come work for us? I'll double Ms. Finch's salary. Triple it. You'll be in charge of—" "No," Era interrupted sharply, holding up a declarative hand. "You're still not listening to the fundamental truth. This isn't about a salary. This isn't a job, Mr. Thorne. This is a complete rebuild. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to stay in Lily's life, we are doing it on my terms. There are conditions. 3 of them." He was instantly back in familiar territory. A high-stakes negotiation. He straightened, his eyes focused, nodding rapidly. "Anything. Name them, Alara." First, Elara said, setting the first boundary with fierce determination, I am not moving into that house. I will not be an employee who lives under your roof, scared of you like Miss Finch was. I can't help Lily or you if I'm just another person on your extensive payroll, ready to be discarded. I need my own space, a place where I can't be fired on a whim for speaking the truth. I will find a simple, unpretentious apartment downtown near the university. You will pay the rent, but it will be my space, my sanctuary. I will be an independent contractor or a consultant, but emphatically not a servant. Am I completely clear? He nodded, impressed by her acuity and the sheer strength of her moral boundary. Clear. An apartment and the autonomy that comes with it. Done. What's the second condition? Second, this is not just about being nice or providing superficial companionship. That's not enough anymore. Lily has been through severe emotional trauma. And frankly, so have you. I'm just a waitress, Mr. Thorne. I don't have the professional skills for this level of care. Not yet. Sebastian's face fell instantly, his momentary hope dissolving. So you won't? So Elara continued, holding his gaze as an indispensable part of my employment. And this is non-negotiable. You will pay for my education. I'm enrolling in the night program at the City University. I'm going to get a degree in child development and psychology. I'm going to learn precisely how to do this right, with professionalism and expertise. I'll be Lily's companion and support during the day, and I'll be a focused, serious student at night. I will not fail her because I was too proud to admit I needed to learn. Sebastian stared at her, genuinely stunned. He was used to people trying to extort him, to flatter him, or to steal from him. He had never in his life encountered anyone who demanded an education and expertise rather than pure cash compensation. Yes, he said, his voice thick with a new emotion he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. Respect. Of course, the education is yours. Absolutely. Tuition, whatever that education costs. And third, Elara said, her voice dropping into a register that had the tensile strength of steel. This is the most critical demand. This is the cornerstone of our entire agreement, and it is absolutely not negotiable. I am listening. You, she declared, pointing a deliberate finger directly at him. This condition is entirely about you. You are going to step up and truly be a father. You will be home every night. The required time is 6 p.m. sharp, not 6:01, certainly not 6:15, but 6 p.m. And the moment you walk through that front door, your phone, your lifeline, your connection to the insular world you use as a hiding place, it immediately goes into a decorative basket I will place on the hall table. And it remains there, dormant, until Lily is finally tucked in and asleep. No quick checks, no furtive glances at the market indices, no one last urgent email, sneaked in under the guise of the bathroom. From 6 o'clock indefinitely until she is asleep, you are physically and mentally present. You belong to her entirely. If you cannot agree to that stipulation, if you refuse to honor that commitment, then I am walking out this door right now, and you will never see me or perhaps understand the path forward again. For a full minute, Sebastian Thorne remained frozen in absolute silence. He meticulously studied his hands, the very hands that had signed labyrinthine, 1,000-page contracts, the hands that had relentlessly built his multinational financial empire. He mentally cycled through the frantic market openings in Tokyo, the perpetually demanding 24/7 news cycle, the dizzying billion-dollar decisions that materialized and shifted every single second. He contemplated the vast, gaping, almost ravenous void that his manic work schedule habitually filled. Elara wasn't just imposing a curfew. She was demanding that he stand still and face that terrifying emptiness head-on. He slowly raised his gaze to his daughter, whose small, pale face was desperately hanging on his unspoken answer. In her expectant eyes, he caught the faint, painful ghost of his deceased wife, and he heard her final, echoing words to him. Asterisk, it's all just empty, Sebastian. You've built an empty golden world. He was utterly, definitively done with empty. He met Elara's eyes straight on, and for the very first time, she saw the vulnerable man beneath the hardened facade. She saw the true person, not the powerful myth. 6 o'clock, he stated, and the single word was less a promise and more a solemn vow. No phones. The deal. The subsequent few months were anything but a storybook fairy tale. They were grueling. Era relocated to a clean, brightly lit two-bedroom apartment situated conveniently near the college campus where she had enrolled. Sebastian, demonstrating a commitment that surprised his entire executive team, made good on his word and orchestrated the complete clearing of her professional reputation. Although Era had absolutely no desire to ever step foot back inside the Corner Cup diner, he also rehired Miss Finch, who, after delivering a long, deeply tearful apology to Era, quickly transformed into her most steadfast and grateful ally in the complex, delicate rebuilding of the Thorne household. The first few weeks of the enforced 6 p.m. rule were pure, agonizing torture for Sebastian. He would arrive physically present at the appointed time, yet his mind was demonstrably 1,000 miles away, still circling the globe. He would exhibit physical symptoms, a rapid, involuntary twitching of his fingers, constantly reaching for the phone that was nowhere near his grasp. He was an addict undergoing a painful, forced withdrawal. Era, now armed not just with college textbooks but with a clear, renewed sense of authority and purpose, was relentless in her efforts. She didn't merely facilitate interaction. She actively commanded and forced it. Mr. Thorne. Lily learned how to correctly spell Tyrannosaurus today. Lily, show your father, she would command, allowing no room for evasion. Mr. Thorne, you are on dish-drying duty tonight. Lily is washing. No, not your long-suffering housekeeper. You. Sebastian, to his immense credit, awkwardly complied. He woodenly dried a ceramic plate, the first piece of common kitchenware his hands had touched in over 2 decades, and he listened with unnatural concentration as Lily haltingly sounded out the colossal dinosaur's name. Era instituted no screens Sundays. Sebastian very nearly suffered a corporate aneurysm. Era, I can't just. The Asian markets open on Sunday night. They can wait, she said calmly, holding up a pair of muddy, well-used boots. We are going to the park, the public park, Mr. Thorne. You are going to learn how to properly push your daughter on a swing. He went. He genuinely hated the initial feeling. He felt exposed, conspicuously surrounded by what he mentally categorized as normal people, a world away from his soundproofed boardrooms. But then, he placed his powerful, high-stakes hands on the small of Lily's back and gently pushed. She emitted a high-pitched, crystal sound of pure, unadulterated joy, a sound that he hadn't heard reverberate since before her mother's death. He pushed her again and then again, and for one magnificent hour, the CEO of Astronomics did nothing else but propel his daughter higher and higher on a simple metal swing, and a small, deeply cracked portion of his frozen heart began, ever so slowly, to thaw. The house changed subtly but surely. Era began to fill its sterile corners with vibrant art supplies. She and Lily baked cookies together, the comforting scent of vanilla and occasionally burned sugar replacing the cold, clinical marble hall's usual sterile emptiness. Lily began to laugh. A full, rich belly laugh, replacing her old, nervous, breathy giggle. Era and Sebastian's professional relationship solidified, built upon a bedrock of deep, unspoken respect and trust. They were highly effective partners in the most crucial endeavor of his existence. Project Lily. He often arrived home precisely at 6 p.m., utterly exhausted, only to find Era seated at the kitchen table, her textbooks spread wide, passages highlighted on complex subjects like childhood attachment theory. He would quietly make them both a fresh pot of coffee, and she would, without a hint of accusation, explain the underlying psychological reasons behind his daughter's anxieties, effectively teaching him the nuanced language of devoted fatherhood. One evening, almost exactly a year after the terrifying hospital crisis, Sebastian returned home. It was 5:58 p.m. He walked into the front hall, and the mansion was a raging storm of noise, color, and joyous chaos. There were children, at least 24 7-year-olds, running wildly through his pristine atrium, screaming with delight and covered head to toe in cake frosting. He found Era in the kitchen, expertly frosting a new batch of cupcakes. What? He asked, though he found himself genuinely smiling. "Is this? It's Lily's 7th birthday party?" Alara replied, handing him a perfectly frosted cupcake. "I invited her entire class. I think—" She looked around at the sweet anarchy. "I think it's going remarkably well." He watched the scene unfold. 12 months prior, his security team would have been instantly dispatched to clear the entire building. Now, he simply shook his head in quiet wonder, took a sizable bite of the cupcake, and walked into the living room, where he was immediately and joyously tackled by his daughter and her entire screaming cohort of friends. Later that night, the mansion was finally, blissfully quiet. The last parent had collected their sugar-hyped child. Era was helping Ms. Finch with the final lingering dishes, and Sebastian was sitting in the library, a comfortable, book-lined room he now used every single night. Lily padded in, wearing her striped pajamas and clutching her worn leather sketchbook. "Daddy, I have a present for you," she whispered. "You do?" he asked, pulling her gently onto his lap. "But sweetie, it's your birthday." "I know. But I finished my book," she explained simply. "I wanted you to have it." Sebastian carefully opened the familiar, slightly worn leather book. The first dozen pages were the same heartbreaking drawings he had initially seen. The giant, dark, empty house, the tiny, solitary girl isolated in the sprawling garden. But as he turned the pages, the narrative began its marvelous change. There was a new, brightly colored crayon drawing of a tall man in a business suit looking utterly bewildered while awkwardly drying a plate. There was one of Era and Lily cheerfully planting bright flowers in the garden. There was a vivid picture of him, Alara, and Lily at the public park, with Lily soaring high, practically flying on the swing. He turned to the very last page. It was the drawing she had labored on for the past month. It was the house, the giant, sprawling mansion. But this time, every single window was blazing with a bright, warm, life-giving yellow light. On the front lawn stood 3 distinct figures: a tall man, a woman with warm brown hair, and the small girl securely placed in the middle. They were all holding hands tightly, and above them, drawn in a shaky, careful 7-year-old hand, was a 4th figure, a small, smiling woman looking down peacefully from a white cloud. "Who is that, Lilybug?" Sebastian asked, his voice unexpectedly thick and choked with emotion. "That's Mommy," Lily said simply, leaning her head against the steady thrum of his chest. "I told her in my head that you're not lonely anymore, so now she can finally be happy too." Sebastian closed the sketchbook, hugging his daughter so tightly he feared he might break. He looked over her head, across the quiet room, to where Era was standing framed in the doorway, watching them. Her own college textbooks were tucked securely under her arm. He didn't need to speak the words, "Thank you." His eyes conveyed everything. Era returned his gaze and offered a small, tired, but profoundly proud smile. The waitress, the supposed nobody from a forgotten slum, had accomplished what all his billions in assets could not. She hadn't merely saved a frightened, lonely child. She had courageously built a functional, loving home from the foundations up. In a world that so often measures wealth purely in dollars, in rapidly updating stock tickers, and in the sheer size of our architectural accomplishments, it is startlingly easy to forget what rich truly means. Era Hayes had begun with nothing. Sebastian Thorne ostensibly had everything. But it was Alara who held the true, lasting currency. Boundless kindness, profound empathy, and the extraordinary courage required to truly see the person standing right in front of her. She didn't just save a lonely child. She saved a family unit. She proved an indelible truth, that the biggest, most impactful changes in life don't materialize from a billionaire's checkbook, but from a simple, deep, and unwavering human connection. What did you think of Era's courageous story? Do you believe that one person's simple kindness can genuinely break through the imposing walls that money and power have so carefully constructed? Let us know your insights and thoughts in the comments section below. We make sure to read every single one. If this deeply touching story resonated with your heart, please help us spread this message by giving this video a strong like. It significantly helps our channel continue to grow. Share this narrative with someone in your life who desperately needs a reminder that truly good people are still out there working wonders. And most importantly, if you want more true life dramas and powerful, impactful stories like this one, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video release. Thank you for watching.